All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to this explainer, where we're going to unpack history's most famous and, honestly, perhaps most misunderstood assassination. Now, we all know the basics, right? A group of Roman senators hatch a secret plot, they surround their leader, and they stab him on the Ides of March. But what we're going to explore today is the shockingly ironic aftermath of that exact event. Because the murder of Julius Caesar wasn't just a political hit, it was arguably the most spectacular backfire in all of human history.
I want you to hold on to this question as we go through this explainer. What happens when killing a tyrant accidentally creates an emperor? The men who assassinated Caesar genuinely, truly believed they were saving the Roman Republic from absolute rule. But, as we're about to see, their actions triggered a bloody domino effect that permanently destroyed the very republic they were trying to save. Their grand plot unraveled in literally the worst possible way.
Section 1. The Tipping Point. Let's look at the events of 45 and 44 BC that finally pushed the Roman Senate right over the edge.
It is wild how quickly things escalated here. According to ancient historians, these were the three last straws. First, in early 45 or 44 BC, the Senate came to formally present Caesar with some honors. Now, strict Roman etiquette dictated you stand and greet them. Caesar didn't rise. Whether he just balked at the idea or was actually physically held down by an ally, the message was crystal clear. He no longer respected the Senate. Then, in January 44 BC, a royal diadem was discovered on his statue. Two tribunes removed it to protect the republic's anti-king values, and Caesar actually had them stripped of their office. Finally, in February, at the Lupercalia festival, Mark Antony publicly offered Caesar a crown. Caesar refused it, sure, but to a lot of people it looked like he was just testing the waters to see if the crowd would cheer for a king.
And Caesar's dangerous wordplay? Yeah, that just added fuel to the fire. When members of a crowd greeted him as Rex, which means king in Latin, Caesar replied with this clever line, "I am not Rex, but Caesar." Now, Rex was also a standard Roman family name, so he gave himself plausible deniability, but the common people, the plebs, they saw right through it. When he removed those tribunes who tried to police this royal behavior, he put himself firmly on the wrong side of public opinion. The paranoia was officially cemented. Everyone thought Caesar wanted a throne.
The Republicans felt they had absolutely no choice. Section 2. Anatomy of a Conspiracy. Inside these secret war rooms, Gaius Cassius and Marcus Brutus started plotting in February of 44 BC.
60. Just think about that number for a second. That is the astonishing scale of this plot. Try to imagine keeping a deadly secret among roughly 60 Roman senators. Brutus and Cassius deliberately recruited men near their own age of 40, completely skipping the reckless youths and the feeble elders. They recruited from Caesar's known enemies, but also from his own ranks. You had men acting out of deep Republican ideals and others acting out of pure, petty jealousy. And yet, this massive group somehow managed to coordinate the logistics of an assassination right under the dictator's nose.
So how exactly do you pull a plot like this off? Well, a fatal strategic rift formed between the conspirators almost immediately. The Optimates, the more hardline faction, they wanted a clean sweep. They wanted to kill Caesar and his powerful right-hand man Mark Antony, purging the leadership entirely. But Brutus pushed back. He argued they were acting on principles of justice. If they killed Antony, it would look like a bloody political purge rather than a noble tyrannicide. Brutus insisted they assassinate only Caesar to maintain the moral high ground as liberators. Sparing Mark Antony would prove to be the absolute game-changer that doomed the Republic. They actually threw around some wild ideas, like throwing him off a bridge during elections or attacking him at a gladiatorial game. But the Senate, specifically the Curia of Pompey, was literally the perfect trap. First off, Caesar had recently dismissed his official bodyguards. Second, only senators were permitted inside, meaning his formidable, intimidating friends couldn't intervene to save him. And third, doing it in the Senate House framed the act not as some back-alley murder, but as a public, noble political sacrifice for the state. They picked March 15th, just days before Caesar was scheduled to leave for a major war in Parthia.
Section 3. The Ides of March. We're going to strip away all those polished Shakespearean myths and look at the grisly, chaotic reality of March 15, 44 BC. The dramatic tension that morning was off the charts. Caesar actually almost stayed home. A seer named Spurinna had explicitly warned him that his life would be in grave danger no later than the Ides of March. On top of that, his wife Calpurnia woke up from a terrifying nightmare of him dying in her arms. These omens were so severe that the all-powerful dictator of Rome initially decided to just cancel his appearance at the Senate that day.
But, the conspirators were ready for this. When Caesar didn't show up, Decimus Brutus went straight to his house and mocked the omens, basically asking if Caesar really wanted to be ruled by a woman's bad dreams. And that worked. Once Caesar finally arrived at the Senate, Mark Antony was deliberately detained outside in a long conversation so he couldn't protect his boss. Then came the signal. As Caesar sat down, Tullius Cimber approached him with a petition, grabbed his shoulders, and violently yanked his toga down. That was the green light to strike.
Now, you've definitely heard this quote, "Et tu, Brute, then fall Caesar." It's totally iconic, right? Well, actually, scratch that. It is entirely a Shakespearean invention written over 1,600 years later. It is not historical fact.
Let's contrast that myth with Caesar's actual gritty reaction. According to the Roman historian Suetonius, when Cimber grabbed his toga, Caesar yelled, "Why, this is violence," or in Latin, "Esta quidem vis est." A split second later, Casca struck the first blow at Caesar's shoulder. Caesar grabbed Casca's arm and shouted, "Casca, you villain, what are you doing?" There was no poetic surrender here, folks. Caesar fought back.
As they swarmed him, some ancient historians claim his actual final words were spoken in Greek to Brutus, "Kas su teknon," which translates to, "You too, child." However, Plutarch and other sources suggest he actually said nothing at all at the very end. Upon seeing Brutus, a man he had pardoned and treated basically like a son, standing there with a drawn dagger, Caesar simply pulled his toga up over his head and accepted his fate, falling right at the base of the statue of his old rival, Pompey.
And this aftermath brilliantly illustrates the horrific reality of the attack, which we know thanks to literally the first recorded autopsy in human history. Out of 23 stab wounds, only one, a single strike between the ribs, was actually fatal. Think about that. The rest were non-fatal. The assassins were acting in such a frenzied, chaotic, and amateurish panic that they were actually cutting each other as they scrambled to get a piece of the dictator. Caesar largely died of blood loss. The deed was done. The tyrant was dead. Section 4. Death of the Republic. This is where the assassin's dreams of a restored republic instantly evaporate.
So, the conspirators march out of the Senate, bloody daggers in hand, expecting to be hailed as conquering heroes. But the citizens, they did not cheer for freedom. The news was met with stunned, total silence. People locked their doors in terror. And soon, that terror turned to absolute rage. The Roman lower classes loved Caesar. Mark Antony, who, remember, Brutus had foolishly spared, capitalized on the mob's grief, delivering a fiery funeral speech that sparked a massive riot. The mob burned the Senate House to the ground, and the assassins were forced to run for their lives and flee Rome.
Suddenly, there's this massive power vacuum, and it's quickly filled by a terrifying new alliance, the Second Triumvirate. You have Octavian, Caesar's 18-year-old grandnephew and surprisingly savvy chosen heir. You have Mark Antony, the fiercely loyal general, and Lepidus, a key cavalry commander. To fund their new, brutal war against the assassins, these three instituted what were called proscriptions, basically legally sanctioned murder of their political opponents. The Republic was literally tearing itself apart to avenge Caesar. The dominoes fell incredibly fast in this bloody chain reaction. Step 1, Brutus and Cassius are hunted down and defeated at the Battle of Philippi, where they both commit suicide. Step 2, with the assassins dead, the triumvirate turns on itself. Lepidus is marginalized and exiled. Step 3, Octavian goes to war with Mark Antony and his new ally Cleopatra, defeating them decisively at Actium. And finally, Step 4, Octavian returns to Rome as the sole, undisputed ruler. He takes the title Augustus, effectively becoming the very first Roman emperor.
By trying to kill a king, they created an emperor. But hey, the story doesn't end there. Section 5. Caesar's enduring legacy. Because Julius Caesar managed to outlive his assassins in a way no one could have ever predicted.
He conquered Western culture permanently. We are literally surrounded by his cultural ghosts today. We still basically use his calendar, the Julian calendar. The medical procedure, the Caesarean section, takes its name from a myth about his birth. The modern Jeep Rubicon is named after his infamous river crossing. And our everyday language is filled with his quotes. The die is cast, crossing the Rubicon, I came, I saw, I conquered. His name even became the literal title for rulers, like Kaiser in German or Tsar in Russian, for 2 millennia.
Which brings us right back to our final, lingering thought for this explainer. By trying to save the Republic from a king, did the assassins simply give birth to an empire, a god, and a legend? They thought they were eliminating a tyrant,
but instead, they permanently ended the Roman Republic, handed absolute power to an emperor, and immortalized Julius Caesar forever. It is, without a doubt, history's greatest and most tragic backfire. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive. I hope you walk away seeing the Ides of March in a completely new light.